Hi, Nigel. Welcome to Mel, Gabby and Friends, the podcast that bridges psychology and spirituality and also aims to meet a range of alternative holistic practitioners to find out about what they're doing. Welcome.
Thanks, Mel. Great to be here. So, yeah, looking forward to this.
So what I like to do is find out a bit about the work that you do, but also the background, because we've spoke a couple of times at the networking meetings that we met at. Just a bit about your background and what sort of led to this life change to end up doing the work that you do. But before we sort of go into that, you're basically a wellness coach and breath trainer.
Yes.
So what's that in sort of simple terms?
In simple terms, well, wellness coach covers a lot of things. I began with breath training about 10 or 11 years ago when I started to move into this arena. And the difference between breath training and normal breath work, I suggest, I do breath work and what have you. Breath work tends to be work on in the moment, finding calm, like in a yoga studio or Pilates and what have you. And they're techniques you can use, and they do hold you in a calm state for a while. But the difference between that and breathing training, breath training really, is that I train people to breathe properly 24/7. So hopefully you learn to breathe better for your whole health, for your whole life. So it really just, not everyone needs rebreathing training, of course. People breathe naturally quite well, but for whatever reasons, trauma or lifestyle or an illness like COVID, etc., can just mess up your normal breathing patterns. So so that's the breathing. The wellness bit covers, I teach mindfulness and lead mindfulness and meditation, a lot of anxiety management, life coaching. I recently qualified in NLP techniques to help people move through challenges. And last couple of years I've been doing forest bathing as well, which is taking people out into nature and letting nature do its magic in terms of eye guide and help people slow down, become more mindful, use their senses, and use some of the breath work, meditation kind of techniques, but outside in nature, which kind of multiplies the effect, if you like. So that's a kind of range of services that I cover.
Brilliant. So before we sort of take a deep dive into each one of those, what got you into this? Because I find when I come into contact with a lot of practitioners that it's often a life changing or light bulb moment where one day, they switch careers. So what were you doing before you started doing this, and how did you get into this?
Well, going back actually to going back to school, my favourite subject was always biology and human biology. So whether that's the blood circulation system or the reproductive system or how our brain kind of connects with our body, I was always interested in that subject, and always had sporting interest because I was quite sporty when I was younger, running, football, and the like. So I was always interested in, if you like, the psychology and the biomechanics of the body. But I left school at 16 to go and earn some money for family because we're quite poor. My dad got MS and my mum died quite young. So I went to school as the eldest of four. So I went to work, and I ended up in marketing, which some people say, oh, that is so far away from what you do now. And it is, but I worked for companies who kind of believed in what they were doing. So I worked for companies like Royal Mail and BT and British Airways and stuff, who I believed at the time when I worked for them anyway, they really believed in serving their customers and trying to do the right thing. I can't say that's true for all companies anymore for other reasons. Not to say they've got businesses to run, but I always wanted to help the end customer and was interested, got a bit of a creative head. So I work with lots of great creative people and lots of analytical people, data analytical people who work very differently, but I was able to bridge. And I find the science bit of the wellness interesting. There's lots of science behind breathing and forest bathing, for instance. and lots of proof of how it works. So I found all that side interesting. But the real kick over into wellness was about, I don't remember the day, it's about 11, 12 years ago. I just woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't breathe.
Wow.
And I was gasping for breath. And I didn't know what was going on, to be honest with you, because I've not been ill. I think I might have been in hospital when I was 4. I had pneumonia at 6 weeks. I know that, I was told, but I can't remember it. But I hadn't been ill for anything, spent no time in hospital, never been overnight in hospital in 60 years. And but I just woke up and had no idea what it was, as I say, and went to the doctor. They couldn't see anything. I've got a low resting heart rate. I've got low, good blood pressure. Everything seemed fine, but I lost my voice. I was losing my energy. Kind of couldn't do calls. I was due to do some presentations to clients at conferences and stuff. And I was just being a bit just stuck, really. And doctors couldn't work out anything. And as you do, when you're really kind of a bit panicky, don't know what's going on, I Googled at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I found this method called potato breathing, which is a Russian-Ukrainian doctor who discovered, I think it was in the 1950s, that anyone who was really kind of hurt or in pain of some time or illness, almost certainly were breathing with their mouth open. And so there was a course starting in Pimlico in London the week after, and I went on that course, and I've got to say that it just helped me get better so much quicker. So I was doing these breathing exercises religiously for a few weeks. Combined, actually, which is where the forest bathing bit comes in. Each afternoon, I'd walk down my Bernese Mountain Dog down to nature reserve at the end of my road. I live in North Kingston, and it's just outside Richmond Park. And there was this nature reserve that no one knew about then. So I'd go in there, sit down there quietly with my dog, and just breathe. And I'd started to learn a bit of meditation. And I'd say the combination of that, I was better within weeks. And I was able to operate, fully function again, got my breathing back to where I think it was before, actually. I think it was just something that triggered it. And I know what triggered it, actually. I was working for a software company in London as a business consultant. And I'd been put in touch with a couple of teams who really weren't teamy. So they just didn't involve me. They didn't behave as a team. And they dropped me in it at last minute, etc. I think that, and the combination of our girls who were just coming into their teenage years, and they were both been adopted when they were just short of 2 and 3. So they've been with us 22 years now. They were getting to teenage years, and all their neglect, all their anxiety, attachment issues. They've also got special needs, autism, ADD, epilepsy, and a number of kind of different things between them. That was just getting a bit much for my wife. So I was just kind of being a bit overwhelmed, to be honest with you, trying to look after everybody. And I was always trying to look after my original nuclear family because my mum and dad died a long time ago. So I was just like, it was just trying and make everyone happy, keep everyone sane. I think it just kind of told on me. I didn't feel it coming. I didn't know it was coming, though, because I'm quite chilled and laid back most of the time. I just think, oh, whatever, I'm resilient. I can deal with anything in life. But it was that triggered me. And from that, I then set up a breathing company, thebreathingstudio.com, which is one of my websites now. But 10 or 11 years ago, I spoke to people about breathing. In fact, if I talk about a lot of people about breathing now, some people think I'm a bit strange, because obviously I wouldn't be talking to them if they weren't breathing. They wouldn't be alive. But the difference between good breathing and poor breathing, and the difference it can make, is immense. That I found myself, and I just wanted to tell the world about it, to be honest with you. And in fact, even the difference it made, even though I'm quite old now in relative terms, the difference it makes when I exercise and I run and I'm on a football pitch, my stamina endurance is better than people decades younger than me. I don't get lactic acid. I don't need to stretch after an hour and a half of football. It just
Wow.
makes such a difference. My body just works so efficiently.
Wow.
And then sorry,
I was just going to say that I was quite interested in your comment that, you know, you woke up not being able to breathe, and there was a lot going on, but you weren't actually aware, like consciously aware that that was getting too much, or that you were starting to feel overwhelmed.
No, I think like lots of people, I'm a natural carer, and I focused on other people, and just assumed I was okay. I had no real, because I wasn't sleeping badly. I've always slept pretty well in my life. I get my 7 to 8 hours sleep, and not being one for waking up in the night and needing a drink or going for a pee or any of those things that some people suffer with. I don't know where it came from, really. Obviously, I knew I wasn't quite as happy at work working in a team, but I've worked in companies before, big corporates and small advertising agencies, small little consultancies, worked on my own. And you're always going to encounter people who are teamy or political or who don't do the right thing for the customer or what have you. But maybe just got to me. My reserves ran low, maybe, I assume.
Well, sometimes a lot can be going on in the unconscious mind, can't it? That even if the conscious mind can think it's, that you're doing okay, like you say, and you're getting on with everyday business, but there can be an accumulative effect, because we certainly know in mental health that preceding any kind of big breakdown, breakthrough, anxiety or depression is stress is the key factor in many cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw that in my childhood. My dad was had a breakdown, was in a mental health home for months. We'd see him some weekends. He'd come home all drugged up. This was 60s,
Wow.
early 70s. And he was just first. My mum had some anxiety and stuff when I was probably 5 or 6, I think, to remember. But I'd never inherited any of that stuff, it seemed to me. But yeah, I'd grown up with lots of disruptive household, living with disrupts, arguments every night and stuff like that. Not to my mum and dad particularly, but just from uncles who had learning difficulties and mental health challenges who lived with stuff. So I kind of take it in my stride in many ways, and it's stood me in good stead for my daughters who have their moments and as they've grown up and stuff, because they're high anxiety, etc., and challenges. But it is interesting how you're not always aware of it, and then it suddenly hits you. But luckily, I hardly probably had 20 units of alcohol a year. I've never had drugs. I've never turned to any crutches, but assumed that I would always be okay. But then the breathing was the thing that helped me. So that could be my crutch if I ever needed again, almost. So, yeah.
And something that, you started to explore, but started to build your holistic business from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I still, even after the breathing studio, because I saw the odd client people referred to, and I'd see clients in the evening and help them out. But I went back carried in that other job for about 15 months. Sorted out, spoke to my boss, and then I got made redundant. I was early 50s. A lot of ageism around, to be honest with you, even 10 years ago. Early 50s, now early 60s. And I'd had senior positions, been really well paid in stuff, was well known, networked, but I was finding that trying to get a job was quite hard. I was having 4 or 5 interviews and still not getting it. I didn't need the money I used to earn either, but people just weren't taking me on. So 2 guys approached me to invite me to work, set up a business, which I did, which kind of works okay for 6 years, but then they screwed me over at the start of the pandemic, and there's a load of stress there. But actually, the stress was all their angst about money and what have you. I was just kind of fighting my corner for the family, but I was calm. nearly all the time. There's that little bit of testosterone that came in. Sometimes I felt in the tummy. I just wanted to punch them on the nose, to be honest with you, but I'm a pretty calm person, so that's never going to happen. But, you know, it's a natural thing because it was affecting my family, not just me. But I got through it. I got some help, legal help, proved them all wrong. And then that lasted about 6.5 years, that company. And then at the start of the pandemic, I thought I'm going to go and retrain in breathing, get to the next level with Patrick McEwen, who's one of the best breathing trainers in the world. And yeah, I'd finished my mind calm and mind detox meditation and techniques about the mind and body working together. And yeah, I've done all that. And so I did my breathing. And then I picked up with the forest bathing. I went on a session of forest bathing at Kew Gardens. My wife bought it for me as a present. And just loved it. And then at the end of it, thought, well, I've been doing a lot of this for years. With my daughters, when they were young, we go for walks and we just stop. And I'd say, close your eyes, feel the temperature, switch on your ears, and just using the senses. So a lot of it was natural to me, plus all the mindfulness meditation stuff we did. Again, I've been doing it for years, but not in a particularly outdoor environment. So you know, so I could literally pick up forest bathing and do it myself, really. I had all the tools, but actually, because I wanted to work with the NHS Green Social Prescribing and get some more accreditation, I trained with the Institute of Forest Bathing here in the UK, based in Surrey Hills, quite handy. And they're very passionate, and they're doing great things with 11 UK universities tracking, and the government tracking the impact of forest bathing and really endorsing and building upon all the work that had been done in Japan in the 80s and 90s. And forest bathing, it's just natural in Japan and in South Korea, Finland, and now in the Surrey Heartland or Kingston Richmond. In theory, if you go to a doctor, you say I'm feeling a bit anxious, or you know, feeling a bit low, or you know, I'm starting to get some OCD type of behaviours. The switched on doctors may refer you to come and see someone like me or the Institute of Forest Bathing via the Green Social
So you can actually get it on social prescription?
Yeah, you can.
Wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, no one knows about it. That's the thing. But there's a reporting that came out from the government just 2 weeks ago, published, talking about forest bathing. An ex-marketing colleague, peer of mine, does wild water swimming in Surrey and the impacts of cold water swimming. So we're going to do some stuff together, days out in nature, put those packages together. Yeah, and just walking in nature. But forest bathing is not just walking in nature. It is really just really slowing down and connecting and doing the stuff.
So is it like mindfulness meditation and really slowing everything down to experience that?
Yeah, you literally, I get people to do sensory exercises with their eyes, their ears. I invite people, if they wish, to smell the earth, smell things and stuff. And it's smell's the most emotive emotion sense that we have as well. Has good and bad connotations, smell, unfortunately. As you'll know from your work, you know, the smell of a perpetrator is often remembered long after the visual was gone. So yeah, so you have to handle people with care in forest bathing. You have to be empathetic and look out for them. I do get a lot of tears in forest bathing and stuff, brings out emotions. But you know what happens in tour stays on a nature tour, so everything's fine. Everyone's respectful, and support is needed there. But yeah, there's a lot of work being done with mental health charities that I work with, the Institute of Forest Bathing, and myself, homeless charities, Kingston Carers Network, for example. I did a session with recently, and a retreat where I did breathing and the forest bathing. So yeah, there's lots of people out there. There's a big demand for it, as you can imagine. So it's just one of the great tools that we can use.
And it's interesting what you say about blending, you know, that you've always done it, the mindfulness meditation and being out in nature, and that can arouse some emotion from people as well, because it's something I've noticed when I've been teaching yoga and meditation, especially if I do something for a few hours, like a mini workshop. And I often say to people that when you slow the world down and all the distractions, not just whether or not you smoke anything or take drugs or drink, but when you just slow the distractions of you haven't got your phone on, your TV on, and you're with yourself and you still everything, that is often the signal to the body or the mind where it can start to release. And release is where healing occurs, but it can be a little bit scary for people, can't it, when they first experience being, whether it's in nature or doing mindfulness or meditation. But it can be that they can connect with a deeper part of themselves, even if they don't always understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. There's those books, and the body knows the score, or holds the score, and has always memories, and a lot of stuff embeds itself in ourselves. And funny enough, I know that that my throat is my weak point. So it was interesting when I choked, because I know a couple of, I've not had, some people say parents dying, everything's trauma, and I've had knives out of my stomach and stuff, but they were never, to me, big traumatic moments. They were just moments. But I know that a couple of occasions, there was an occasion with a teacher when I was younger. I was just a bit cheeky, flirty with a teacher, and she told me off, and it came back years later, and it came back to my throat.
Wow.
I was about 9 years old, and then that was the thing when I worked on, I'm thinking, oh God, it was that student teacher. I was a bit cheeky. She told me off. I just felt this shame, and at that point, I couldn't speak to her for a good hour, and it always comes back to my throat. So I work on my throat, and it was interesting that came up in my breathing at the time. So yeah, giving that, but then allowing yourself to be you, and that self-love is really hard for some people.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I mean, I'm lucky that I've always love myself and accept who I am, and no real regrets, even though we all make one or two mistakes in life, but I just knew they were part of my journey and made me who I am, and I've always been comfortable with that. But some people really self-judge, and it's like
the inner critic, and it's one of the toughest things for people to really sit with and move through. I'm trying to think of the right words. When you start to try and meditate for the first time, or mindfulness, whichever way, and people will often say, I can't stop all these thoughts in my head. And I'm like, if you try and stop them, chances are they're going to get worse.
Sometimes it's conflict. It's conflict.
It is, isn't it?
It's that attachment to wanting something, and that conflict to not wanting that. And it's that acceptance that at certain times they're both going to be present, and thoughts, emotions, everything, they're only temporary. They come, they go. They may come again, but they'll go. So,
but it's knowing to trust that, isn't it? Because I remember telling a friend years ago, because I had lost a few people as well when I was a kid, like significant people had passed, and grew up in a family where none of that as children was expressed, shared, understood. So some things sort of whacked me, with surprise as I got older, and I got into the therapy, working as a therapist. But I remember when my mum passed, by that stage, and the training that I'd done and the understanding I got about grief and what can happen to us, is I knew that for the first few months, of course, it's horrendous when you lose anybody, especially if it's a significant person in your life, that the waves of grief would come in. And it was about how, psychologically I could accept, okay, there's a wave coming in. Okay, I'm experiencing now this whole range of overwhelming feelings, but trusting it would pass. And I found that a lot of the work that I've done, whether it's with the young people that we've come into contact with through my service, the parents or the adults that I've worked with direct, it's often the fear that's stimulated, the fear that they've got some mental health issues, fear of what the anxiety is going to do to them, or the fear of experiencing or feeling, especially, I'd say, I don't want to get ageist about it, but I found with people who'd grown up, born in the 60s, 70s and 80s, because we didn't talk about things, we did hide things, there was a lot of shame and guilt attached to things, you did shut down and you couldn't be open and vocal, and so that was stored within the psyche and in the body, which is why therapy was so important. Whereas a lot of this has become more normalized, but people sometimes still reap the impacts of those early levels of conditioning, the messages they got about how they express themselves, which is probably what you see with some of your clients as they come through.
Yeah, particularly some of the older clients or parts of the country, to be honest with you. You know, my wife's Scottish, and you know,
Yeah,
it's not just Scottish generalisation, but her family didn't show emotion. They didn't show love anyway, or they didn't show,
yeah,
actually didn't show that. You know, there was love there, but it just wasn't expressive and those things. So they didn't talk anything. Yeah, they just kind of got on with it and stuff. And I think about my wife and her childhood, and we talk about it, mum and dad and their childhood has a major impact on how Jackie views things, does things, our relationship, kids. It just kind of filters down. You're absolutely right. But all the, you know, all the emotions and stuff, it's energy. And it's getting the right mindset to think that even those breathe, and when you feel that pain in your heart, and you know, or whether it's someone you love or a really close pet, actually, to be honest, you've got dogs has been the last few things, although I did recently lose a close cousin. But that feeling of that hole in your stomach, and that whole feeling, and then that is love, though. That is love and emotion. That is human love just coming out. And the fear is, again, is an energy, and it's like anger. So when people get angry, you know, when things bad happen to people, it's seemingly unfair. Some people are able to use that anger to turn it into a positive and act on something. So like Stephen Lawrence's parents or something, you know, they turn that into active. They've got anger, but most of it they can direct to something positive. It doesn't mean they've still got the stuff, and you know, it's never forgotten. But and there's other times you turn anger and it turns into violence. So terrorism. But some of the greatest people in the world, the Mandelas and you know, Martin Luther King and people like that, they went through their journey, and at times they were angry and did things they thought was best, including terrorism and stuff. And then, you know, they got to a journey and what have you, and found a different path. I'm not judging a path or not. Some people find themselves in a conflict that maybe the only way they done in their conditioning is to fight for them and their family and their community. So,
and making some meaning from the experiences, and hoping that doesn't happen to anybody else, because that's often what drives us. But it's interesting you mention anger, because it used to be all the rage when I was working in schools as a therapist, or running groups, or transition work, whatever that was, when I worked at the local authority, of having these anger management courses. And it was always the boys that were put forward for the anger management courses, and the girls would get the therapy. And I think to some degree that probably still plays out. And yet it was interesting because, you know, it was always seen in a negative light, not seen as an assertive tool that we have access to, that when our rights or boundaries are being violated, that we're able to stand up and say something. And this is what I used to see with some of the lads at the school, is they'd see something they didn't like, they'd question it. They'd pull somebody up because, you know, they had a real core belief about their own rights, or would be very protective of other students, and it was always seen in a negative light. So we had to do some anger management with them, which you know, really you can't, I saw you couldn't really focus on one emotion, because we are emotional beings, and some emotions, like what you say, we can express, and other emotions will be put in the shadow because of the environment we've grown up in is either acceptable or not acceptable to express that part of ourselves. Because for some people, they can't express joy and excitement because, you know, we've worked with families where they've grown up in a depressive environment, and being joyous and excitable would be too much for the people that they were with.
Yeah, in many ways, almost sometimes in a sensory way. So I experienced that. I adjust my behavior, to be honest with you, even in my household. You know, I can't be too joyful or silly or something, because it or makes certain noises, because it antagonizes two members of my family who are really sensory on the that spectrum, sensory, through to yeah, if you celebrate or you're confident, that can be seen as angry, where humility is a core value of your family or your community and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, it is tricky for people to navigate. That's why you see some people. I mean, I tend to be similar at home to work, always have been, but some people are just different characters in different environments, and
in
we
different
do
settings.
adjust. We do
Yeah,
adjust. You know, I'm very different in a group, particularly a strange group, as opposed to I am when I'm one-to-one with a mate or a girlfriend, which is what I prefer. I'm much, you know, that's my preferred mode of communication and
mm,
contact and intimacy is one-to-one with people. But
mm.
yeah, I have to adjust and know who I'm with, really.
And the reason I bring that up about these different emotions and how we can suppress them or have to adjust according to the context is that creates stress on the body, doesn't it? Is if you have to push down a lot of who
You're
you are and
natural.
how you feel.
Yeah, yeah,
And I certainly know in the stressful periods in my life, because I've had chronic fatigue seriously twice, and I still live with it to some degree. And like you said, you know, you can have an experience and your energy can be completely affected, the way that you communicate, articulate. I know when I'm having more of a chronic fatigue sort of day, because my thinking's slower, my capacity to make decisions and the way that I function. And that's I've learned is the build up of all the different experiences I had maybe in my childhood and in my teens. And if you're not able to express them and find some outlet for that, or you're shamed for having those feelings or thoughts, that's a hell of a lot for the system to suppress. And
yeah,
can come out then, can't it? It's almost like I remember being at work and being really stressed and not even realizing that I wasn't even breathing at all, you know, that I would be typing away and holding my breath and didn't
yeah.
realize I
Loads of
was
people
cutting
hold
off
their breath.
vital.
Lots of people hold their
Yeah,
breath. A big issue. Yeah, yeah. Not breathing at all.
not
Yeah,
breathing at all, and then cutting off that vital oxygen and not realizing.
yeah. It's not going to work properly if you're not getting the oxygen to it. And that
Yeah,
could be holding your breath. It can be just bad breathing, because good
yeah,
breathing gets the right chemical mix for you to maximize the oxygen delivery at all points of your body. So yeah,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
yeah, no, I totally get that. And yeah, and the way we treat, going back to earlier point, how we treat girls and boys and men and women. You know, women aren't supposed to be angry. They're not supposed to be this. They're not supposed to behave like that. Protect.
yeah.
It's just, it's that's a bit horrendous. But then the whole women's health and the way we research it, the way they track drugs, don't take any account of the woman's menstrual cycle. It's just becoming to the fore in athletics now, for example, all the
Mm,
stuff. They know that if a woman's in her first 10 days of a period, she can perform great. After she ovulates and goes into luteal phase, your physical performance isn't going to be as good. But they're only just realizing that
wow.
now. So if you turn up on the Olympic 100 meters final or 5,000 meters final, and it's the right time for you, you're going to be that extra percentage better.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that includes, you know, all the impact that has on breathing, because women's breathing tends to deteriorate after day 10 to 12 of a cycle.
That's interesting because, like what you said at the beginning when we started talking, is that, you know, you were looking for a job in your 50s and there's a lot of ageism around. You know, how many people have got to their 50s and have been struggling to function because of the changes that the body goes through? And it's been put down to just age, and performance is clearly something that a lot of businesses are interested in terms of how people perform, and they, you know,
Yeah,
whether it's their products or clients. And yet so much of this has been going on under the surface as to what can influence someone's capacity. Because I certainly know how my capacity is influenced when I'm stressed or when I've done too much, because, you know, I don't know if we use the technical terms as much now, but in psychology they used to talk about type A personalities, you know, that could be driven, doing really well in certain environments, could get really successful, but at the same time would manage home life, kids, work, absolutely everything, until something trips them up one day and then they realize that actually the world's starting to crumble a little bit because they can't you can't maintain it, just as in sport. You can only maintain being an athlete for, what's the lifespan of an athlete? Is it 20 years, 30 years? I don't know.
Well, to be honest with you, though, you're getting more and more athletes and sports people who are more aware of their body and
Right.
what have you, who, you know, you get marathon runners who don't peak to their mid-late 30s
Right.
as
Yeah.
well. It's and Joe Pavey, for example, who's running 5 Olympics, she's 45. She probably won't run next year in France, but you know, her running capacity and stuff has been around for, you know, she's kind of super, and she's a mother too. But you know, there's also a danger that you try and become Superwoman or Wonder Woman and Superman as well, and the pressure for you to do all those things and do them. And some people can do them and some people can't, but even the people who can do them, they may pay at some point in the future if they're not doing the self-care. And self-care to some people is going out and running every single morning and what have you, and you're kicking off free radicals, and if you're breathing badly, you're causing inflammation in your cardiovascular system, you're putting stress on your muscles. But you know, people misconceive that as sometimes healthy. You know,
well, that's never really talked about, is it? Because I remember I used to be an average gym goer for about 20 years, was incredibly fit and did weights and ran and rowing and everything, until my body crashed and burned and I ended up with chronic fatigue, because no one had ever told me that, one, it's the nutritional balance, as in what goes into your system, and two is you can over exercise, you can put too many demands on the body. So you've got the demands on the body, or you can have demands on the brain if it's a stressful work environment. And I kept on just hearing, you know, you need to go to the gym, you need to do, I think public health at the time, who were responsible for this trend in social prescribing, was saying 10,000 steps a day, and we realized that actually that was a made-up figure and there was no actual research behind it, you know. So a lot of the mythology out there about how you function, what keeps you functioning and what helps, and I think that stillness and beingness and not going out for a run every day and is still not seen as something that is highly beneficial.
Yeah, if going out for a run is your stress reliever, which for some people it is, that's fine. But you don't need to, you know, it's proved by many things, you know, high intensity training for 10 minutes it's equivalent of going to run 5 miles. So it's what works for you. I'm not saying anyone should do high intensity. I quite like that. I still, my 60s, I'd still playing Monday nights football against 17 and 20-year-olds. But, you know, I know my capacity, but they sprint past me, I can't get them, but I know my endurance and stuff, even at my age, because of my breathing is, and because I was brought up to be outside all the time and I did stuff like that. I didn't sit in playing computer games. I know my inbuilt stamina is way beyond people in their 20s and 30s as a generation. I see it a lot. Not everybody, of course, but as a general statement, I also think that exercise is important. Knowing, mixing aerobic stuff and anaerobic stuff with weights, as you said. But you know, people pound the pavements, and 60 to 70% of heart attacks are between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. in the morning.
6 a.m. and 10 a.m.
Yeah, and a lot of that is I think they joke in America around Central Park, ambulances just drive around, private ambulances for people to drop. Now, well, it's probably an exaggeration, but the New Yorkers like getting out in Central Park and running. But a lot of heart attacks because people push themselves. And early in the morning, I can tell you, if you're not a good breather and you're someone who breathes, snores, has sleep apnea, gets up in the night. What I talked about earlier, the carbon dioxide levels, oxygen levels and nitric oxide, which you get through breathing through the nose, if they're not right, you're not getting maximum oxygen delivery to your muscles. And when you're running, that's your heart, that's your brain, that's your glutes, that's your thighs, that's your calves. And if you're not maximizing the oxygen delivery, your body starts to go, you're going to lactic acid earlier, and your body starts to say, I need more oxygen, I need more oxygen. I need more. And that then converts into, I need more air, because your brain's not that clever, particularly if you got into bad habits. and you start to go, you want to take more air in. More air is not the answer. Less air, less is more, is true for breathing.
Right.
Less breath and less air. It just is better. And then what happens is your heart then goes, oh, I've got to pump quicker. I've got to pump more hemoglobin. Got to get more of that air, oxygen I'm getting into me, to the muscles. And again, that doesn't work because you've not got the nitric oxide. You're breathing out through your mouth, so you're losing too much carbon dioxide. Because though carbon dioxide is a poison, so is nitric oxide, so is too much oxygen, to be honest with you. If you don't get that chemical mix that's natural in your body, and you're not breathing through the nose, the carbon dioxide deficit that you've had by not sleeping well is just exaggerated and leads to overstress, inflammation, and eventually cardiovascular disease, and ultimately heart attacks.
Wow. So are you referring to the balance between those three aspects?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I am. And nitric oxide is a poison outside of us, but we have a natural amount of nitric oxide in, and the body, you can supplement nitric oxide with beetroot juice, green leafy vegetables, or if your cardiovascular system is broken down and you have erectile dysfunction problems, you can take Viagra, which is basically nitric oxide. Just
is that
helps pump the blood and helps the vascular system for the blood to flow. If you don't have that, you only get that through breathing through the nose. And if you don't got that balance right, your body's inefficient. You'll end up with depleted oxygen, so you'll have a brain that won't work as well. You know, there's research on breathing and Alzheimer's and dementia. There's research on breathing with almost any disease. It's not that well known. It's picking up again, but getting sponsorship for things like that when this drug-related world we live in. Don't get me wrong, not all pharmaceuticals are bad. They save us many times, but you can't claim too much, as you know, with alternative medicines, because the pharmaceutical companies, Google, the biggest clients of Google, they quite often will come and knock on your door or restrict your advertising, as we know. Sometimes very good cases, because people claim some crazy things, obviously, in this world we live in. If you don't get that mix correct, your health is really going to suffer. And in fact, bad breathing has only been a thing for the last 200 years, post-industrialization. So again, there's a book by James Nestor called Breath, which was a #1 bestseller, where he spoke to the Wim Hofs as well, and he spoke to Patrick McEwen, who was my teacher. I did also learn for a company called Online Potato as well, from a Russian guy, taught me a little bit, who worked with Potato in the 60s. They got skulls that are hundreds of years old. They dug up the skull of a human being, and the skull is pretty square-jawed. They got perfect teeth. Okay, you might argue they only lived to their 30s and 40s, but no one had bad teeth. Since post-industrialization, we started eating certain foods.
Sugar,
we don't chew food. Our muscles aren't used almost from birth. And I'll maybe touch on that in a bit. But actually, if you just look at there was an article last week, it was a bit of a provocative article. It said, people today are so much uglier. And it was referring to the fact that a lot of people today, and you'll see people, their faces are longer, their chins are set back to here, which restricts their airways. They have big dental problems. Kids and dental problems these days. Dentists are having it. You can't get a dentist for love nor money. A lot of the kids, there's no space for their teeth to grow. They're breathing through their mouth, so they're getting all the bad stuff that you breathe in through your mouth that you don't get if you breathe through your nose, because your nose has a filter of the hairs and has a nitric oxide that cleans and cleanses it. goes down into your lungs. When you breathe through your mouth, you're sitting next to someone who's got COVID or any other virus or anything, you're taking it in. Breathe through your nose, you've got a chance it will get filtered out. So all these things are impacting people today. And yeah, the facial changes in people. And there again is some research that shows that indicates that breastfeeding is preferred method of feeding a baby, because the way you suckle,
the sucking,
sucking in your mouth grows. Now you can imitate that, I believe. I don't know too much about it. You can imitate it in certain bottle feeding, the way you feed. And then if you go on to too softer foods too quick, and you don't get children to, and loads of food these days is soft, we just make it easy for convenience, for time. You know, we don't sit there and crunch and chew. And I'm one of the worst, but I must have crunched and chewed as a kid, so I can save my face. But my face is quite receptive to good breathing. Yeah, which will lead to sleepless nights. Lots of children have sleepless nights, and it's not all down to being on electronics and blue lights, though that doesn't help. And warm houses and mold, they're all kind of research on why you sleep bad and get poorly. But there's a piece of research that I saw that 40% of children who have disordered sleep will be labelled as ADD, having learning difficulties, or being badly behaved kids in the classroom by the age of 6 or 7. And it indicates that if you breathe, you eat well, you breathe well, some of those will not necessarily be labelled like that. And their physical and their attention and their behaviour and ability to absorb information will focus. So it's just fundamental stuff. You know, I'm trying to work with schools at the moment, with teachers, parents, and the pupils. Because if the children can self-regulate, and if you learn to breathe, you keep it for life, unless there is a trauma, or you get long COVID, or you get something like me, that it goes awry. But if you've been taught how to breathe properly, and teachings, you can be taught, because obviously I teach clients and I taught myself. But if you're stuck, you're growing up and you've got a parent who's mouth breathing all the time over you and interacting with you, if you've got a smiley parent, you're more likely to grow up smiling. If you've got a parent who breathes through the mouth, you're going to grow up breathing.
Yeah, what's modeled?
You change your breathing, you just model it and mirror it. So that's why it's really important to go back to basics and teach children and parents. And honestly, hand on heart, I believe it would make a huge difference to this nation's health and other countries. And again, research for the countries where they traditionally ate better and weren't so westernized foods getting in. And I'd say some of the athletes from Africa and stuff, those who stick to their traditions of eating and breathing, which is mainly mouth, running on their toes, those who maintain that will be superior. But more and more athletes are learning. Federer and Djokovic, tennis players, they always look calm on a court. They're never like an Andy Murray or some of the others. They're breathing and they're calm combined. I saw a photo this week. It was a bit weird, came up, but it was a Daily Mail thing, came up and said, supporters are wondering why, what's her name, Ivan Swiatek, she's the #1 tennis player, the Polish girl who's won a couple of majors. She trains now with her mouth taped.
Wow.
And that's how I sleep, with my mouth taped, or I did. I'm just back to normal now. But those athletes who train and just breathe through the nose have a superior advantage. And you can be a great athlete without it. But I joked to someone the other day, if Harry Kane, who's obviously got nasal problems, the Tottenham England footballer, he's like all the time. If he learned to breathe properly, he could switch and play in midfield and run up and down all day. I kind of joke, but you know, his endurance and his ability, so it's becoming more and more known in the sporting world as well, because that can make a huge difference.
So you mentioned earlier, COVID, and of course, lots of people who've had COVID ended up with long COVID, and you've come into contact with those clients, and how do you work with them? What do you notice?
I noticed, depending if they had a ventilator on them and they were, perhaps in their mind a couple of days from death and weren't improving, that as opposed to they've had long COVID and got almost like chronic fatigue syndrome, like you were describing. It is a combination of physical and mental. Some of them go through a lot of stress, a lot of mental stress, and some of the ones I've worked with, it's a long journey. Most of my sessions, I have clients for a few sessions, and then they know what to do. It's up to them to incorporate it, practice it. So I have a session with a client, and we do exercises, some calming exercises. Some are literally to build up I was talking about that balance of CO2 and nitric oxide.
Yeah.
We do a combination of different exercises that are about breath holding.
Right.
Because you're rewiring in the back of your neck is your breathing receptors, part of the brainstem. The medulla is where your breathing receptors are. And you've got receptors there for oxygen and CO2. So you're rewiring them and trying to get their threshold back up, their threshold of CO2. So where your CO2 levels in your body may now be 1%, you want to try and get them back up so your body maintains a level of 3 to 5%. So that when that hemoglobin hits the muscle, the brain, the eyes, skin, whatever, that level is right and maximizing the efficiency of that transfer of oxygen from the hemoglobin in the blood into your muscle.
So are you saying that when you hold your breath, it stimulates the back of the brain?
Yeah, what you're doing, it does that. Now the other part of your brain, well, part of that will go, oh, I don't like this, I'm not used to this. So you'll get some conflict.
Right.
And that's where I have to do the exercises. And though I do small groups sometimes, I've done teachers with long COVID and what have you, it's best to do it one-to-one, because everyone breathing at a different level, and I need to take people on a different journey. Because if you're a highly anxious person or claustrophobic, and I ask you to hold your nose, hold your breath, do this, reduce the amount of air you're taking in, all these different exercises we do as you retraining and telling your body that you need a fraction of the air that you think you need. I could live my life with one nostril, absolutely no problem. I take 6 breaths a minute on average. The average person takes 12. Highly anxious people take 20 to 30 to 40 breaths a minute.
Yeah.
And the other thing to consider is your parasympathetic system is only activated on the out breath. So you're
reading that on your site, yeah.
You only rest and heal on the out breath. When you're breathing in, you're in the sympathetic and you're looking for alerts. In the old days, it'd been saber-toothed tigers, maybe a rival tribe, maybe, something coming into your land. So you'd have been up there. These days, our anxiety is caused by social media, or someone looking at me, or someone walking down the street and we're judging them the way they're dressed, like they've got a hoodie on, or they're dressed strangely, or they're a goth, or what have you. There's all these conditioning activators we've got on. Whereas, what you want is to be in the out breath. So the out breath, you want to be longer. When you're in the out breath, the heart rate slows down, your inflammation's likely to fall, your cortisol and adrenaline levels, because obviously your parasympathetic system, autonomic nervous system, is connected to your limbic system, which is where all your emotions and your memories are. So if you're anxious, that will trigger and bring back the fears and the events. When you're in the out breath, it won't do that. And of course, the other thing is your endocrine system, our hormonal system of men and women, and it impacts that. It impacts that too. How the hormones enter and work with the organs that we're triggering. So that's important. Some of the exercises I encourage people to do is humming, cold water
What
therapy.
does the humming do?
The humming activates the vagus nerve.
Right.
So you've got strong vagal nerve connection. It will work better with stimulating your organs to work, so your digestive system, because you only digest food on the out breath. So if you're not going to be digesting food.
Yeah.
And if a lot of people with breathing problems are overweight, it's chicken and egg.
Wow.
And then the hormones. We know some overactive, underactive thyroid, this, that, testosterone, whatever it is, they all have impact. So it's all got your breath helps as a real platform to help orchestrate.
Yeah, it's all symbiotic, isn't it? Because I know that a lot of the work that public health did when trauma became something that was information that started to come through some of the research, that that's linked with the vagus nerve, and now we've got polyvagal theory, which is how we work somatically with people who have got trauma in the system, which is activated through the stress response. And people who've grown up in traumatic and stressful environments, what we started to realize, and we used to try and teach teachers this as well, is that if a young person has grown up in a family where there's, say, been domestic abuse, lots of shouting, arguing, some of the research that was emerging, and I'm talking about over 10 years ago, was showing that their stress system, they had a higher level of, I think it was like a baseline stress than a kid of the same age, similar background, that wasn't living in a stressful environment. So basically they were on a low level stress all the time, hyper alert and hypersensitive.
Well, my
just
daughters,
as you described my daughters.
Yeah, my daughters were like that. They still got levels.
Yeah.
They've done lots of therapy, do lots of work. Obviously, they don't listen to their father about breathing, but they're not bad. They're a lot improved. They sleep silently and what have you. That's absolutely absolutely true that that all that trauma, that lies people lead, and if you're brought up in a environment where you're always on the edge, or you're someone who turns that experience into, well, that's what life is like that, and I need to be on guard,
more hypervigilant.
Yeah, which is why I was lucky, because I had some of that in my childhood, but I don't know why, but other members of my family have. So we're all different, whether it's hereditary, whatever it is, or because I was then surrounded by different people who helped calm me and what have you. But it is so
I think that's a good point. That is a good point you make, though, because you can have 10 people who've all had exactly the same background, and some do fairly well and live successful lives, depending on how we define the word successful. And other people have had really difficult times and, thwarted relationships or health difficulties. And there's certainly, again, going back to public health, and some of the research is in most local authorities across the UK that have a public health department, and they would be sharing the research on things like heart conditions, diabetes, sort of the top 5 really, and how underlying those health conditions is early stress, and in a proportion of cases early trauma. So there was some work going on in different parts of the country of trying to help identify, when practitioners came into contact with somebody, doing a better level of assessment to find out what the areas were like. So that you could sort of narrow down, because the sort of top 5 was if you had a parent who had mental health issues, drug and alcohol problems, or if there was neglect in the family. And we're talking about the sort of heavy end of trauma, because lots of people can experience some level of trauma. That you might be okay if you'd only had 1, you might be okay if you'd had 2 layers. But what they found is people who had, say, 5 or 6 layers of these different types of trauma, and not positive role models who were calm, who were able to model a different way of existing, were more likely to start experiencing mental health issues.
Yeah.
And it often started with stress. It often, because our perceptions are guided through the filters that we have, our own individual psychology about how we perceive the world, aren't they? And that incoming data will stimulate our nervous system as to whether we run or whether we think we're okay in that circumstance.
No, you're absolutely right, because I was the eldest of four. So some people think being the eldest is really stressful. In some ways, you know, I've been mother, father, and older brother to my younger siblings a lot of my life. But I was okay with that. But then a middle child, I've worked with some bosses who are middle children, and their stress levels and ability to win is beyond the pale, you know, because they've got successful older brothers. And, you know, it's like,
The sort of competitive edge.
Yeah, you're so competitive. Yeah, and I like competition, but yeah, things I've seen people behave towards other people and do is very strange. But I think, yeah, so I, you know, I obviously had the mental health and some stuff at home, but for some reason, and it, you know, they talk about, you know, they're getting too spiritual about inheriting stress as well from previous
through DNA
lives or from previous through your DNA. And as we know, even when we've got the same DNA, same genes, we're individual siblings of, we've all got our own characteristics, but there's stuff there that may come across. But yeah, even though stress has gone on, I was lucky. I always felt loved. And even the conflicts between people in my household, uncles, fathers, and what have you, I always felt that they loved each other, even at a very young age, and that it was just circumstances. In our case, it was money, and the other was mental health and getting bullied, because people got bullied in where you used to get locked up in the 50s and 60s. But my uncle and cousins weren't locked up, thank God, because they're beautiful people. But but their behaviours sometimes were, you know, uncontrollable. But I understand that. But I always felt loved, and I think most people's intentions are good. You know, circumstances, conditions. You know, if you're a bank robber, you're a child molester, you're this, you're that. People need to be protected from those people. But you know, those lives they brought up, they could be conditioned something genetically or something in their environment, and that was their way they thought people survived. So we always got to remember things like that. And people say I'm too soft, but you know, you need to protect people. Absolutely, you can't let some people out on the streets. But the whole ability to look at the world is, I think, important. Which brings me to a point, actually, is when we talk about self-love earlier, some people's self-love is, I just do what I want then, you know, and say, oh no, you're gonna need to love yourself, live your life, follow your heart. And then some people go, well, I'm not doing that, I'm doing this. And you can say something, but there's an impact on other people, does that not matter? No, because I'm doing this. So people will love themselves in a wrong way. And then some people love their families, so it's all about their family. And it's like, oh, I'll do anything to protect my family. Anything? Some people would. And then it's their community, and then it's the people who are like them, white, middle class, or this religion, that religion, not anyone outside that. And then there's that belonging thing that people need to belong to. And people have lost that sense of belonging to, maybe. Whereas I'm quite happy just to be me personally, I'm happy to belong to the human race and the universe. And if I think of something I do, I try and think of the impact. I'm not an angel by any stretch, and I eat meat and I do other things that people might think, but I try and balance it and do what I can. Whereas I think that needing to belong and behave is another stressor for people, is another thing that causes people stress. So I have to behave like this because my rules, my Bible says this. I have to behave like this because my version of that is this and this and that. And it just causes trauma. And then when you don't behave like someone expects you to, like you said earlier, I just think all these belongings and this grouping and division that we're having at the moment, extreme left, extreme right, people thinking they could walk on other people's rights because they should be allowed to do what they want, I think is causing lots of stress and conflict in the world. And
I think what you're highlighting though, because it's, you know, you're going into several layers of complexity, that
yeah,
we're all a mixture of our culture, race, gender, environment, our family system, because you could be an only child and have problems. You could grow up in a family of 14 and have no problems. And what your experiences were as a child, and then your perception of those, as well as the environments you've moved through. And I think one of the things that we used to take it back to its simplest essence when we were running services is that if somebody is living their life and holds their set of beliefs, and they feel, we're using words now like aligned with it, that fits and it works for them, and they're not experiencing any stress, mental health issues, anxiety, depression, because they're usually, that those are symptoms of something deeper often, and that's how you unravel that. And if people are living their lives and they're doing pretty okay and they're functioning, that's usually the demarcation between whether or not there is a problem with that. Is that becomes a problem where people sometimes need to seek help, is when they are waking up during the night or at 3 o'clock in the morning, they can't go back to sleep, their eating's been affected, they realize their performance has been affected at work, or their relationships are suffering, or they're arguing with everybody. Then that comes a time, and sometimes we get little nudges that there's something that doesn't feel quite right, and we're not looking after ourselves. And it's that balance, because sometimes you can be doing too much, like you say, for yourself, and you know, giving to other people can be altruistic and good for some people. Sometimes our people are giving way too much to everybody else, and they
the other way around.
their needs. So often it's about balance, but of course I'm coming at it from a wellness sort of mental health continuum of the understanding I've got at the moment from the narrative we've got in psychology about what makes us happy, more at peace, alive, vibrant, or whatever. 20, 30 years ago, people didn't have the license to think about these things. They were busy putting food on the table. They were busy working 15, 20 hours, 2 jobs, 3 jobs a day to pay for their houses, bring up their families, and the stresses were there. They were just different. But I know equally, I grew up in a Scottish family, and alcoholism and alcohol use was rife in the communities I grew up in. So usually what we'd say to people is, you know, if something's now starting to disturb you, if there's that little thought in the back of your mind, if you feel like something's off key, not right, then go and seek some holistic support. And that can be a massage, it can be a forest walk, it can be some breathing support, it can be some coaching. And that's the aspects of wellness coaching I like, because sometimes you've got to look at those different facets of life, haven't you? And say, you know, how long has this been going on for? Is it something recently? It's been going on for a long time. How can we prevent you from things getting worse, ending up in a crisis? Because most of the time people only ended up in our service because the kids or the families have gone into crises. That's when people look for help. And often what I'm saying is, often the signs are there before then. You know, you're not breathing properly, your throat's shutting down, you're tired all the time, you're getting headaches, your digestion's gone off. So unraveling that can be tricky. But I agree, I think our breath is our life force. Oxygen into our system and fueling our system through, you know, the frequencies of the environment, of what nature has around us. Sometimes it can be very simple. Sometimes some very simple exercises can be incredibly powerful. And that's why I was quite interested in hearing about your work and how we realize, even though we should, but we don't, because I live in a town, lots of people live in cities, how important being in natural environments are, how important it is to be in forest and wild swimming and nature.
And doing those other things that they know is good for the vagal nerve, like Tai Chi, yoga, humming, as I say, doing things you love. If music's your thing, listen to music, or if silence is your thing, just, you know, or running water, go sit by a river. If it's birds, go and listen to birds. So whatever it is, and it's that combination of the breathing, the physiology of the breathing, the biochemistry and the mechanics, and getting that relationship with the mind, subconscious, unconscious. As you say, it is doing all those things, even if you don't know what it's doing or what it's addressing, just having some of that will help keep you on a certain level, and maybe let things pass through or not come up. Not that you want to suppress things, but or it might allow them to come out. And as you said earlier, when stuff comes out, you can deal with it. If you're not aware of something, and like people aren't aware of good or bad breathing, but say if you're not aware of something that's causing you problems, and I wasn't at my time, there's nothing you can do about it. You kind of hope that when the awareness comes, you're like, by luck, I googled something and it found me a route. It could have taken me down the drug route, from the doctors, and it's like, whoa, I'm glad it didn't. But that might have been what I needed at the time. But it's the awareness is important, but that ability to know your mind and body, and teaching people from a young age again to know that, self-regulate and things, that's key.
So we're coming to the end of this podcast, but before we do, is there any top tips that you like to give people that you might see people time again, and you think if they just knew these 5 things even before they see me?
Well, I think the first thing is just Google nasal breathing versus mouth breathing, and you'll find all you need to know. And it's not just me saying that, and you'll be surprised. The health authorities are really onto it. I would say that sleeping is a big issue for people. If you are a mouth breather, then you'll tend to wake up in the night with dry mouth, want to go to the toilet, and then you worry about and you need to go for a pee and all those things. You wake up with a lack of energy. I would consider getting some tape called myo tape, and it just doesn't go across your mouth. We used to take the whole mouth, but it just keeps your mouth together, your lips. And you sleep on your left hand side ideally, but the right's okay. Don't sleep on your back, because it tends to throw back your tongue and cause airways. If you keep your lips together, it trains you to breathe through your nose. Now, if it's too much to start with, you're sitting at home, there's no one, you're not going out to answer the door to the postman with this tape on your mouth. Just practice. Just retrain your muscles to keep your mouth shut. But just be aware when you're running, cycling, walking, sitting. Swimming's the only thing where you can't really breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. But then I think that's because man wasn't born with webbed feet, and swimming is something that we do. We maybe need to go fishing, but we were never meant to be in the sea, to be honest with you. But then I don't think we're supposed to be in the sky. But hey, keeping our mouths shut, being aware, breathing through your nose. It will be difficult for some people to start with, but you have to persevere with it and see a breath trainer like myself. Breath work's all right, but a lot of breath work, they teach you to breathe out through your mouth. And you'll get that short-term sense of release, but you can get that breathing through your nose. You breathe through your nose now.
What if people have genuinely sinus issues though, and they struggle to breathe through their nose?
Practicing this will help. If you've got a deviated septum, it can be more difficult. And I have had clients who've got deviated septums, but if you persevere at it or go gently with your breathing trainer, they'll take that into account. But just sitting calmly, closing your eyes, just feeling, if I'm with you now, you just close your eyes now, and you just breathe, feel the air going in through your nostrils and then out through your nostrils, hopefully a little bit slower and longer, the warm air coming out. I'm speaking, so I'm not doing it properly, obviously. And just that in and out the nostrils is very calming itself. And if you lie on your bed at night with your knees up and your feet flat on the floor or on the bed, soles of your feet, and you put your hands on your diaphragm, which is just under the bottom of your rib cage, you close your eyes and just breathe through the nose, out through the nose. Do that for 10 minutes and just feel, or if you want to watch the diaphragm going up and down, do that 10 minutes before you go to bed and 10 minutes in the morning. That will help set you calm down. It won't stop all your thoughts, as you said. Your mind's very clever, but it'll probably just slow you down, and that focus is almost like meditative, mindful.
Help me move into that deep sleep as well.
Yeah, just prepare you. There's lots of other things. Drinking beetroot juice before you go to bed helps the vascular system, opens up the vascular system. I take beetroot juice before I go and play football. Apparently it can have a 15 to 20% impact on your endurance. All top elite sportsmen drink beetroot juice beforehand now. Even putting more carbon in your body by bicarbonate of soda and vinegar with some water an hour and a half before you exercise is supposed to help increase your carbon exercise. There's lots of stuff that people use. The thing is, if it's like cold water swimming, you know, do it, but only do it if you know how to breathe properly. If you're going to go in and you know, go and see a doctor because you're going to cause yourself a heart attack and you're going to cause stress, don't do the cold showers unless you learn
to breathe.
So a little bit of stress on the body's good, but overstress, like we said earlier, with cold water swimming, cold showers, running, it's not good for you. And some stress is good, but too much stress is not good. So overall, I just say, find a breathing trainer if you want to meditate and do stuff like that a lot, but focus on the breath. Change the way you breathe.
So can clients contact you, and do you work with them through Zoom as well as face-to-face?
If I can, I'd like to see them first time face-to-face because I see a bit more of the physicality and what have you. But no, there's lots of clients I have who just Zoom. Yeah, most clients 5 to 6 sessions. They have to do the homework in between to get to see the difference. So some clients will do the homework, some don't, and those who don't recover as
get the results.
Recover as quick, or they drop out. But it's not. I go at the client's pace because we're all different, and I'm conscious if they're slightly anxious person, or if they're ADD, or they're panicky, or they've had a particular trauma to do with like drowning. I've had clients who've had problems drowning. It didn't come out until I delved a bit deeper, and then we did a bit, and then they found
realised that was behind it.
Yeah, they fell in the water when they were 10 and no one helped them. And I had another client, unfortunately, 43-year-old lady who took me back to her birth. So mum had her at home. The mum was panicking. She was panicking, didn't think she was a baby. Apparently, she wasn't going to get out alive. She got out and she'd had breathing problems all her life until she went back
to that memory.
Replayed and went back to that memory. And then, because she got to a little plateau, and then she kicked on. Amazing.
Interesting. And I guess that's where the NLP comes in handy as well, then.
Yes, when you can take people backwards or forwards. Most NLP's forward, but sometimes some of the stuff you can go back. Yeah.
Goes back. Yeah.
So clients can contact me at thebreathingstudio.com or Nigel at thebreathingstudio.com.
Okay.
Or Nigel at nigelgrimeswellbeing.com, because that covers forest bathing, anxiety, coaching. I'm putting together a wellbeing website at some point, but at the moment I've got breathing and connect with the forest.com, which is the forest bathing. They're separate because people at the moment are coming in for very specific things. Because I'm getting more holistic portfolio of services, I will be building that site. But as everything, it's a balance between life, serving your clients, and trying to build for the future and the marketing. But things like
keeping
this,
balance yourself.
Like this are great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for meeting with me today and sharing more about the work that you do and some brilliant insights into the research around these different aspects.
Thank you for your time. I've learned stuff from you, as you always do when you speak to people. You always learn stuff, so thank you for your time too and for this opportunity. And hopefully we'll chat some more and maybe work together on some things. It'd be great, man.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.